Okay, so basically, as Julia wanted, we're going to talk about health and healing. A little bit about the Rambam. It's going to be later, but we'll start with the idea of healing. And just give you a little story to really give you a basic idea of what it means to heal. There a lot of people go to get their healing if they are addicted at either a AA meeting, or or if it's drugs, it's I forgot what it's called, but it's also a kind of meeting or whatever. It's also the 12-step program. So there was this boy who decided to go to this meeting, and he was going, I would say, about a year or so, and it was taking him a long time to heal, and it wasn't easy. Where there was another boy who came in, and he was only there for like 2 or 3 times, and he goes, this is easy, I can heal right away. And the other boy says to him, don't dream. Because when you go to these kind of meetings and you want to heal yourself and you want to make a change, if you really want to make a change, you got to work on yourself. You can't just expect in 2 or 3 times going to a meeting like this to get healed, because healing takes time. So it's very important that we understand that if we're doing any kind of healing or we're learning any kind of new way of health, we have to have patience. And that is number one. Number one, we need the patience to get to that point. Now, the deepest form of healing is actually having faith in God. So faith in God basically means that is our subconscious, that you have to get to the point that your subconscious is healing, because just to heal the outside of yourself is not enough. You need to go a little bit deeper. So we understand that the faith is a gift from God. When we have faith in God, it's a gift that God gives us. As we know that we are also coming into the month of Elul, which is also a time right before Rosh Hashanah that we have to start working on ourselves. And the faith needs to be like a part of us, and not just say, I believe in God. Okay, so you believe in God, but it needs to be closer to who you are. That's why it says, actually, in this week's portion of the week, it said, Re'eh nasati lecha. Look that I gave you. And giving you is lecha. In Hebrew, there are 2 ways to say you. The you in general, everybody, and the you specifically. So in this case, it's singular. God is saying, here, I gave you to see as a singular person the difference between good and life and bad and death. So in other words, God is saying, I'm giving you the choice. I want you to see it. What does it mean to see? You see things, it impacts you more. Like it says, seeing is believing. Anytime you see something, it makes an impression on you, and it reflects that information within yourself. Now that goes down to the idea of your emotions. So to see is to really take it upon yourself and see the good, the tov. The goodness comes from where? It comes from the heart. So we come from the subconscious to the consciousness that we actually see something, and then we take it to heart, because a lot of times you understand something in your brain, but it's very hard to take it to your heart. So we start in the subconscious level. Actually, we end in the subconscious level also, because it kind of goes like in a circle. So we start to understand something and say, okay, this is how I want to get healthy. But a lot of times we don't have the tov within us. We don't have the heartfulness. We don't really feel it. We know it here, but it's harder to get to the feeling part. And that's a hard thing. That is why a person who could be maybe a thief, and you can tell him that stealing is no good, and he understands that stealing is no good. But guess what? He'll still steal. Even though he has faith in God, he sees that it's wrong, but in his heart, he doesn't feel it. It's not a part of him. So the idea is to feel everything. When we're talking about health and healing, it's not just about our subconscious mind. It's not about seeing that it's that we need to make that change and do health and healing. We have to actually feel it, and not just feel it, but bring it out to everyone else, not just to ourselves, but to the whole world, and affect others, not just our heart, but affect other people. Okay, if you remember the chart that we had before about chachma, wisdom, right? We get the idea, and then we take it apart, the good and the bad, and then we bring it to ourselves, and then we bring it down to the goodness and kindness of ourselves, etc., etc. That's the way that we have to really understand it. So that's what it is to actually connect first to this idea of health and healing. Now, I'm going to go through the cognitive, the wisdom of it, but we'll also try to connect it to our everyday life so that we can actually feel the difference. So if we look at this, we see the idea going back to the beginning of creation, going in the idea of health. It says, Bereshit bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created. The word bara, created, is also the same root in Hebrew as the word briut, which means health. So when God created the world, he brought health into the world, because originally there was what? There was tohu vavohu, there was a void. What happens when there's a void and there's choshech and darkness? We can't heal. Disease is a void. It's an emptiness. It's missing something. And the only way to really fill that void is by creating the cure, creating the substance that will get rid of this disease. I mean, we know that, like, let's say for COVID, they have special medicine that you can take, or different kinds of medications that you can take to help that. So that would be filling the void of your disease. But in a deeper level, to fill the void of your disease would be more of a spiritual disease or a emotional disease that you would fill the void, and that would also come. And that's what the world was created. So then God said, Vayihi or, let there be light, let the healing come. And when we said Vayihi or, we said, let there be light, that was the first utterance that God uttered. So we understand that the creation was all about words. When you say a word, you create something. If you say a good word to someone and tell them, oh, you're so nice, you're so beautiful, you're so, respectful of other people, what does it feel like? What do those words create? They create a warm feeling. They create a good feeling, right? If I were to tell you, oh, you're a loser, you can't do anything, blah, 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 whatever it is, those words create what? Create a void. It creates you feeling like a loser, creates you feeling like something is wrong with you, that there's something missing in you. And this is what God did at the beginning. He created the world with words. Okay? Any kind of words we say, we are creating something. Not just the words, but also in the thoughts. If we think positively, things will come out positively. If you wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to have a great day, of course you have a great day, because you put those words into the world. And if you put positive words into the world, that's the beginning of healing. That's how you heal things in the world. When a doctor tells you, God forbid, that you only have a month to live, those words create what? Creates more of the disease. If you tell yourself, doctors know what he's talking about, I can live for a long time. Plenty of people have done that, and they've lived for years after that. So Whatever words you have could create a lot of things. So words have a lot of power. So what did God do? So God came and he blew himself within man. So he blew a part of himself. In other words, we are the same creators as God because he blew his creation power into us. That was the neshama. So if you do this and you close your eyes for a moment and you stop and you just kind of breathe, and then you bring the breath into yourself and all over your body. Try bringing the breath into your arm and your fingertips and your other arm and your other fingertips. And you take the breath and you bring it into your lungs and your stomach and your back. And then you try to take the breath and bring it even further down to your legs. Notice that there are some parts of your body that the breath comes to, and there are other parts of the body that as much as you breathe, the breath gets stuck. And let me tell you, that is because we have different parts of our body that aren't healed, that we need to heal. Like sometimes it's our back, sometimes it's your toes. You can't breathe all the way down to your toes. Sometimes you can't breathe all the way down to your fingertips. Sometimes you can't breathe even into your nose. Sometimes you can't breathe into your eyes. There are many parts of our body that we really can't breathe into. It's because there are some sort of blockages that we have within our body. But if we practice breathing every day, little by little through your whole body, and you do this meditation every day, you'll be able to reach parts of your body that are still not getting the breath so easily. So this is actually, that is the mirror image that God created us. He gave us this breath that we breathe in and we can heal ourselves because we are creators, just like God is. And that's why it says, Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chayim, that God breathed all his breath into us. Then what happens? God made us perfect. And then we did chet ha'egel. Then Adam ate from the tree of knowledge, and disease came into the world because when something is missing and it's not perfect, that's what happened. So he took away that big light that was in the world and he made it very small, put it into the sun, put it into the moon and the little stars, and he took away that light. And what's the absence of that light? When it's dark, it's fear. People are afraid. So the absence of the light, which is the cure for everything, is disease or fear. When we are afraid and we fear things, that's where the disease comes from fear. Then we go down and we know that the next great person was Noah. He was the one guy with the flood, and it says that he was a righteous person. And God said, come into the teva. In Hebrew, the word teva means an ark, but it also means a word. So God said, come in. Remember, I'm creating the world with letters, with words. Okay, so words and letters in Hebrew also have healing powers. I know that at one point I was doing the letter healing. When you take the letter Aleph, the word for Aleph is avir, which means breath. So the letter Aleph, if you do a meditation and breathe the letter Aleph in and out, it helps your breath go a lot quicker. So that's just a side thing. If anyone's interested, I can do that another time and go through details of the letters. Then came Jacob. there was no, how did people die in the old days? They sneezed and they died. But Jacob, Yaakov, our forefather said, no, 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 no. We want the people to be sick first so that we can be prepared for them to die and not be upset when a person dies. So he asked for disease. Yaakov asked for disease. And he said, please give me some kind of disease so I can be sick and then die. So that's how Jacob knew that he was dying, because he was sick. Then later on, if we go down the line and talk about this idea of disease, I think I actually skipped a part, which I'd like to actually do with you before I go to the end of the diseases. I want to share the screen and show you something about healing. Let me share this. Oops. Okay. Okay, let's go to here. Oops, where's the download here? Okay, so it says that we were created in the image of God, and we talked about this idea of the different modalities of healing. Remember, we talked about the 10 different sfirot, which is we were created in the image of God, and we have the same different attributes within ourselves. The first one we talked about was the subconscious, which is the keter. And it's interesting that the subconscious is connected, if you read on this chart, connected to the respiratory system. So that basically means that the breath that God breathed within ourselves is coming from the subconscious into the conscious. So if there's any problem with our subconscious, it usually has to do with the respiratory system. That's something like, I guess COVID actually really did that in, because it is the respiratory system. But I think that when I was reading it the first time, I was thinking about like asthma. It's usually has to do with the subconscious person that has a lot of thoughts in the subconscious and really connects to that respiratory system. So that's the keter, the crown, the top, the subconscious. Then we said we had the chachma, which is the wisdom. Remember, we said the little bit of wisdom that we get at that moment, we see something, the spark of wisdom, and that has to do with the bone marrow, because the bone marrow is the part of the person that goes throughout the whole body. And it's just a little bit of marrow that builds a whole system within ourselves. And then Bina, which is understanding, it's taking apart it already. So you come from the bone marrow and then you get into the blood, right? Because that actually follows. So if somebody has a hard time with Bina, with understanding, they have a hard time with different things with their blood too. Okay, so this is according to Kabbalah, actually, this chart. Dot, which we said was the connection between understanding, which is knowledge, but it's really the connection between the understanding and what we're going to do about it. It's like we said that if you have a building and you're building the building, you have an idea of what you want to put in the building. And then you say, what's the good things in the building and what are the bad things? And the dot basically says, which rooms are we going to put into the building? Like who's going to be in which room? Like, in other words, is there going to be bedrooms? Is there going to be living rooms? So in other words, to really connect it to really feeling it. And that's the nervous system, which is actually the connection between our brain and our heart and really, really feeling it. Okay, so that would be an issue with the nervous system if you had a problem with dot. And then we come down, and remember we talked about chesed, which is loving kindness, giving. So that's the skeletal system. If you have a problem giving, then a lot of times you might have problems with your bones, with your skeletal system. This is all Kabbalistic. Okay, we can go into that another time, like in detail. Okay, Gvura, which is might. That's the circulatory system. That is the system that constructs us, right? Remember, we said Gvura is constrained. If I'm giving, then what stops me from giving is my thought process of Gvura. Does the person deserve it? That would be Gvura. That would be the circulatory system, because the circulatory system has to do with stopping the blood from flowing too quickly. Okay, that would be the circulatory system. Then you have Netzach, which is overpowering obstacles, which would be the endocrine system. Then you have Hod, which is Thanksgiving, which is the immune system. So these are all systems that are connected to overpowering and Thanksgiving. Okay, thanking other people, gratefulness. Okay, because if we're not grateful, we can have a problem with our immune system. Then goes Yesod, foundation. That's understandable, because the foundation would be the reproductive system, and the crown of this foundation, which is the skin. Okay, like the foreskin, right? And then Malchut, which is kingdom, would be the digestive system, because what is the digestive system? It's the food that's coming in and how I process that food and how I give over things to other people completely. Okay, so this is basic chart. Does anyone have questions before we go on about this thing? I didn't go into details of it, but I just told you in general.
But what does it all mean? I mean, you read, but how can you apply it?
Okay. So application. Okay, the first one, like we said, was the Keter. Okay, the Keter is the crown. Keter basically means subconscious. So your subconscious self would be your pleasure, your willpower, your faith. I mean, those are all things that come from subconscious. So if we have a problem with our subconscious, if we have a problem with faith, we don't believe that there's a God, or we have a problem that we can't enjoy ourselves in life, that would affect our respiratory system. This is Kabbalistic. Okay, so this is all according to Kabbalah. That's how it applies. So if you go through each of these modalities, you can see that if a person is missing that specific or has a low amount, let's say chachma, wisdom, if he doesn't really connect himself to a spark of something new, like let's say he's not creative at all, then he would have a problem with the bone marrow. That would be according. So in other words, this is a spiritual to the physical. So if you have a problem with your understanding, let's say, right? I am creative, but I can't really put the positive and the negative about whatever I am creating. I can't go further than that. Then that would be a problem with your blood flow. Maybe some people have blood clots. Maybe some people have different issues with their blood. So this is a spiritual guideline. It's not something that's physical. It's something that's more spiritual. And therefore it affects your physical, because it says a small hole, the Rambam actually says this, a small hole in the soul is a large hole in the body. Okay, so if you have something small wrong in your spiritual world, meaning, let's say you can't give enough, you don't have enough chesed, you don't have enough loving kindness, it's something is bugging you about the loving kindness, you might have a skeletal problem, like you might have a pain in your leg or your back or something like that, that you have to look and see what good can I do in the world to open that channel for me. Okay, so if a person you see what I'm trying to say? Does that make sense? So that this way of this system is a system for us to understand why we have different issues in our lives, on a spiritual sense. So in order to understand the physical ailment, we look back and say, let's see what we can fix in a spiritual, emotional, subconscious, emotional, or cognitive thing that we have a problem with. And maybe if we look at that, we might be able to fix these different things. Okay, do you understand? Does that make sense? Anybody else besides Ina?
Yes. Marty, can we get this chit chat sheet, just to
Yeah,
have?
just to have, yeah, I can give you a copy of it. I can actually I can put it on, I guess I can put it on the chat or
Yeah,
email.
you can definitely download it. Yeah.
Yeah, I can download it and just send it to, I can email it to you if you want.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's just that
Yes,
this is
for
something,
everybody, please.
yeah, right, okay. This is something, yeah, this is, if you guys want to just send me an email, I'll email it back to you, because if whoever wants it. It's mattieplot@gmail. So if you just throw me an email and just say, can you send me that? I will. Okay, because I'm afraid I'm gonna forget. So okay. So the point that I'm making is that I actually used this at one point to do energy healing. At one point I was using this. I haven't used it in a long time, and I think it's something that we need to revisit. I looked at it again and go, hey, I have to revisit that, because there are things that I have, like different pains in different parts of my body. And I'm like, okay, let me think, like, why is that the case? Like I see here in Malchut, the digestive system, like, why was I having pains with my digestive system? Maybe there was something here that had to do with me giving over to other people. Maybe I was having some blockages at that point. I don't know, because Malchut means to be a king, meaning to give over to others, not just to give over to others, but also take from others. So Malchut goes both ways. So it might be something that we need to look at. So that's one thing that I wanted to add here, just on the way. And today we're mostly going to talk about the Rambam. Okay, so let's go on. And then we know that during the time of the prophets, the disease were spiritual diseases. So here we're talking about this idea that the spirituality and the cognitive and all these emotions and all these things are all interconnected. As we know that in the old days, when they used to have a disease, they didn't go to a doctor, they went to the prophet to find out what they were doing that they could help their disease. Like the disease of tzaraat. It's called leprosy nowadays, but it's not exactly leprosy. It's something like leprosy, but they would go to the prophet or to the Kohen and ask them to look at it, and they would see whether, if it's really the disease, they would put them out of the camp for 7 days. And the person would think about what they did. And usually tzaraat came from talking bad about other people. So that at that time, it was very open that the disease came from a spiritual ailment, from something that we did that we need to correct and work on. So, and even so, at that time, people were very connected to spirituality. Like people, if they were not behaving fine, or God wasn't happy with them, they would die at 60 years old. They wouldn't live longer. I'm just saying, it's like that kind of spiritual world. We don't have that today. As we know that King Solomon, he hid the book of remedies. Actually, not King Solomon, Chizkiyahu, who was a great grandson of Solomon, hid the book of remedies that King Solomon put together for everybody. So we don't know what remedies are for what ailments anymore from the old days. When the temple was destroyed, there's so much more bad came into the world, and there's so many diseases, and it's not like before, when you didn't behave, you got a disease. Now there's so many diseases in the world. It's not the same as it was in the old days, because people were in a much higher level. So in Torah, it says that rapeh yirapeh, that we should, we're supposed to get healed. And at the same time, it says, Ani Hashem Rafecha, that I am God, your healer. So do we have to go to a doctor, or we just rely on God? And what's the bottom line? The bottom line is that God told us to go to a doctor because God gave the doctor the healing power. So therefore, that's why when a person is sick, they go to a doctor so that God can help them heal through the doctor. You can't just say, I'm sick, I'm going to rely on God. No, God didn't say that. God said, go to a doctor. So you need to do that. And that's why Maimonides, who was a very amazing doctor, he has a lot of different things about healing. So here are some of the things that Maimonides talked about healing. The first thing he said was, in order to heal, you need to look at the quality of air. I'm laughing about it because today, did you smell the fires in San Francisco? Anybody smelled it, or I'm the only one?
No, it was a fire.
There was a fire in San Francisco, or was coming from somewhere else? I have no idea, but I smelled.
I could smell the smoke.
It was a fire and it was out there in McAllister today, the apartment building.
Okay, so it's pretty close to me. This is there in McAllister. No wonder I smelled a fire, and I'm like, where is this fire coming from? I had no idea, and I looked it up, and it didn't say anything, so I didn't know that there was a fire. But it's interesting that quality of air, the Rambam says, is very important. So like when we talk about pollution and we talk about, the fires or whatever it is, it's very important to make sure that you have a good quality of air. That is the first thing that he says. Then the second thing he says, it's about your food and drink. Okay, that we know. Okay, and the Rambam talks about when to eat, and all about overeating. Too many meals is no good. He feels that you need to eat like 3 to 4 meals a day at the most. And don't eat too much in between meals. He says to drink water if you can, or maybe fruit only on an empty stomach. That's what he says, not to eat the fruit together with the meal. Also, 3 hours before you go to sleep, you shouldn't eat either. That's according to the Rambam. Also in the morning, when you wake up right away, don't eat a big meal. Start slowly, because otherwise your digestive system is very slow in the morning and it's extremely slow in the evening. So the Rambam holds that when you eat, you should start eating a little bit later after you get up, and eat till about 3 hours before you go to sleep. But don't keep eating, because every time you eat again, your metabolism has to work all over again. So he says probably about 3 meals. Try not to eat anything between meals. Drink water between meals if you can. Also make sure that you have the right body temperature. Don't be too cold, don't be too hot. I mean, he has a lot of very interesting things when it comes to food. He does say that dates, figs, and almonds are very good foods for you. I don't know about now, because I don't know if the dates and figs are really the same as they were in the old days. So I'm not really sure about that. Then he goes into the idea of food, and then he continues. So he says the quality of air, the type of food and drink that you eat. Then he goes into the idea of emotion. So he says emotion is, you need to work on your habits. Like if you want to do something better, keep doing it until it becomes a part of you. He says, even if you do something 100 times, you should do it 101 times. So in other words, to form a habit, he holds that willpower and habits, repetitive habits, are very important. Because he says in order to change an emotion, it needs to be habitual. You have to keep trying to do the same habit over and over and over again. So first it was quality of air, then it was the type of food and drink. Then he goes into emotion. Then he says about exercise. So he says exercise and rest. So he says you need to do cardio, strengthening of your body, and stretching. All those exercises need to be done a half hour at least before meals. It shouldn't be done after meals, because anytime you do exercise after meals, you have a problem with your digestive system. So it's very important that you do exercise before meals. Okay, so that's the exercise and the rest. And then he talks about sleeping and waking. So he holds that sleeping needs to be about 8 hours a night. I do know that 7 hours is okay too. Do not sleep 4 or 5 hours a night because you can't function the next day. Even if you think you can function, but you can't. So it's very important to get your sleep, because not only does the sleep help you do things normally in your life, but it also gives you a better mental capacity. So if you sleep better, your mental capacity is better. That means that you're able to understand things better. I know there's a lot of people who have disturbed sleeps. It's important to have a regular sleep with no disturbance in the middle. Basically, get your phone away from your head. You know, if you have your phone next to your head, you're not going to sleep. It's interesting that for 20 years, I actually did not sleep properly. I was only listening for the kids, which isn't good because I never really got rested. So I had a hard time really concentrating on things. And when I start to get my sleep, I was able to concentrate better, because it does take away your concentration if you can't really sleep properly. Also, when you wake up, don't jump out of your bed. Wake up slowly, because if you jump out really quick, it's not good for you either. It's not good for your health. So you have to take your time and little by little get out of the bed. And actually, that's one of the reasons that when we say Moda'ani in the morning, it actually helps us, because we have how many letters? Moda'ani lifanecha melachai v'kayam shachazarta bi nishmasi b'chamla rabba emunasecha. So you have about 12 words. So it takes you more, you have those 12 words to say before you jump out of your bed, so you don't jump and get dizzy or whatever it is. I've heard different studies about that. When you wake up, you have to go slowly. Okay. And then he says about excretion and retention, make sure that you do not have constipation all the time, because it's not good for your digestive system either. You have to eat fruit sometimes to be able to go to the bathroom properly, juices, whatever works for you. But he claims that if you have a problem with your bowels, it's going to affect your health. That's number 6. Then you have bathing and relationship. Just like we learn to enjoy food, we also have to learn to enjoy our relationships. I mean, toxic relationships is obviously a big problem. We have to nourish ourselves and others in a relationship. So you can't just, assume that a relationship is not important, but according to the Rambam, so that's number 8. So number 1, he said the quality of air. Number 2, he said the type of food and drink. Number 3, he said to be a balanced emotions. Number 4, exercise and rest. Number 5 was sleeping and waking. Number 6, excretion and retention. Number 7, bathing and relationships. And in number 8, he claims that a person needs to have faith. That also is a problem. If we don't have faith in something above us, it could be a problem. We understand that right now we're coming into the month of Elul, which we know is the month that we need to start working on ourselves. And therefore, it starts next week in Mitzvah Hashem, and Hashem wants us to come out to the field. He wants to come to us instead of us going to him. And that's what the month of Elul is all about. It's the idea of Ani Ladodi Vidodi Li, that I am for my beloved and my beloved's for me. So that's our relationship with God. And in our relationship, we have to make sure to work on all the different parts of our health to be able to go on, because just to do it on a physical level, that's one thing. There's an emotional level, then there's the cognitive level, and then there is, of course, on the top, there's the faith in God. And if we keep all of those, because it says that each one affects our whole body. Like we said, a small hole in the body is a large hole in the soul, or the opposite, whichever way you want to look at it. So this is about health. I want you guys to ask me some questions so that we can really understand